Hello again, John Mutchler here, the pastor of the Ferndale Alliance Church. We're continuing our look at Matthew 5 verse 9, which says this: "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." And I want today to get right to the heart of the matter, making peace with God. And I suspect there are two groups of people watching this video today: those that already have peace with God. How about a big thumbs up and a like from you? Then there are those that are unsure about this. You might be a skeptic. You might not be a believer of any kind. You might be an atheist. But before we go on, I want you to think about something just for a moment. This amazing idea of consciousness, self-awareness, being able to think. And I really don't care at all how you feel about the science of evolution. But how in the world did consciousness evolve? Suddenly we're having these, or even gradually, it doesn't matter to me, we're having these profound thoughts of existence, being philosophical, and the ability to feel and to think and to love and to laugh, the ability to have judgments, the ability to worship. It's unseen, this unseenness that we are aware of, where we can imagine, we can create, we can think about the universe, we can think about deep and wonderful things like having peace with God. Where did that come from? And if you study the science of consciousness, we just don't know. Somewhere along the way, I am forced to believe in my own spirit that there is a divine influence that gave us consciousness, gave us awareness. Perhaps we find that back in the book of Genesis, where it says that God gave us the breath of life. There's something of God in us. Because there's something of God in you and in me, we want to have peace with Him. We want to have a relationship of harmony with Him. And I want to talk about that today. Again, blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called children of God. And that is certainly that concerns our relationships to one another, but I think first and foremost, it begins with having a peaceful relationship with God. And we've spoken over the last few days about how our nature, how our selfishness, our conflicts within us lead to our external conflicts. Well, they also lead to conflict with God. So I want to look at one small portion of Scripture today to talk about having peace with God. I certainly want you to invite you to have that peace with God. You can have it this morning. If you've already had it at one time but lost it, you can come back to God. The Scriptures tell us that He's a prodigal Father. He's the Father always wanting that lost son to return home. Anyway, I'm in Romans chapter 5, and verse 6 says this. It says that just at the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. I like that phrase, at just the right time. I think that may have a double meaning there. First of all, the time in history, some 30 years AD, some 2,000 years ago, Christ, King, God's Son, lived a life, taught, performed miracles, convinced people that He was Messiah. He was crucified for those claims on a Friday, and on a Sunday rose from the grave, seen by hundreds of people who were willing to die for that truth, and started this amazing faith called Christianity, based on that event, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I would just say, as an aside, how do you explain the worldwide impact of Christianity if Jesus wasn't who He said He was? Just something to think about. But it says at just the right time, this is the right time in history. Perhaps that's related to the prophecies that were made about Him throughout the Old Testament. And if you want to study that, you can easily search online for biblical prophecies in the Old Testament about Jesus Christ that He fulfilled in that one person. The odds of anybody else fulfilling them in the way that He did, astronomical. So then it goes on and it has this interesting illustration. It says, "Very rarely will someone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die." Something's lost a little bit in the translation here. Again, there's two lines here. Very rarely will anybody die for a righteous person. It simply doesn't happen. To self-sacrifice for someone, even a righteous person. It doesn't happen very often. Then he goes on and says, though possibly for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. The problem is, what's the word good here mean? And the word good would mean a noble, important person, a person of prominence that's a good person. We might think of maybe a president or a leader where a Secret Service agent is willing to take a bullet for them. It's a different type of person than just a righteous person. This is a righteous person that has some stature and some importance. So again, rarely would somebody die for a righteous person. Somebody might possibly die for a noble or a good person. But here's verse 8. But God demonstrates his own love for us, that while we were yet sinners, hostile to God, Christ died for us. Since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? For if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? Said this way, if God is willing to do for us, dying on a cross for us, bringing about our reconciliation to him, how much more is he going to be committed to sticking with us for the long term? So peace with God isn't just a one moment event. I say a quick prayer and God's happy with me. It's entering into a relationship of fellowship and harmony with God from now to eternity, where he works out his purposes, he changes us, he works on those old desires we talked about from Romans chapter 7 and elsewhere, and James chapter 4 verse 1. He's committed to us, to changing us, to becoming, here's the phrase, children of God, sons of God or children of God. So God has sent his Son at the right time for the right reasons to save sinners. So if you're at a place in your life where you do not have peace with God, God is completely and fully committed to being reconciled to you. And it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter if you've done the worst of crimes and sins and transgressions. It doesn't matter. He wants to forgive you. And he demonstrates that to us. He demonstrates his love again by sending his Son to die for us. Again, blessed are the peacemakers, beginning with those that make peace with God in themselves, for they will be called children of God. Have a great day today.